I never imagined I'd wake up to the sound of water splashing in my backyard, especially since I hadn't invited anyone over. At first, I thought it might be my family. Maybe my kids had decided to dive in early. But as I approached the window, something felt wrong. The voices drifting in weren't familiar. There were too many of them, and the laughter didn't belong to anyone I recognized. My stomach tightened as I pulled back the curtains and peered outside. That's when I saw them. A group of kids leaping into my pool, water flying everywhere, completely unaware they were trespassing. And there, standing at the pool's edge like a commanding officer, was Linda, my insufferable neighbor who'd spent months making my life hell with petty complaints and snide remarks. This, though, was a new level of audacity. She was decked out in a pricey swimsuit, sunglasses perched atop her nose, a whistle dangling from her neck. She wasn't just using my pool, she was conducting some kind of private swim class in it. My blood boiled. I stormed outside, my footsteps pounding the pavement, but Linda didn't flinch. She kept barking instructions at the kids, clapping her hands, acting as if she owned the place. A few of the kids noticed me and paused, but she waved them off, telling them to keep swimming. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice sharp. "What the hell is going on here?" Linda turned with a slow, exaggerated motion, as if I were the intruder. She lifted her sunglasses, gave me a once-over, and sighed dramatically. "Oh, it's you," she said, like she'd just noticed me for the first time. "What does it look like?" "I'm holding my swim class." I stared at her, waiting for her to realize how absurd that sounded, but she just smirked like she was doing me a favor. "In my pool?" I asked, my tone rising. She scoffed. "It's a neighborhood pool." I blinked. "No, it's not. It's mine. On my property." Linda rolled her eyes, unfazed. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a pool. You don't even use it all the time. Besides, these kids need a safe place to learn how to swim." I glanced around, noticing a dozen kids in my yard, plus a handful of parents lounging comfortably in my chairs. My patience snapped. "Get out. All of you." A few parents shifted awkwardly, but Linda sighed again, shaking her head like I was a petulant child. "You're being incredibly selfish," she said, crossing her arms. "I spoke with the HOA, and they agree shared resources should benefit the community." My jaw tightened. This isn't a shared resource. It's private property. Linda's smile turned smug. "Well, I have permission," she said, pulling a paper from her bag and handing it to me. I snatched it and skimmed it, an HOA document about community spaces, completely unrelated to my pool. "This doesn't mean anything," I said, tossing it back. She clicked her tongue. "I knew you'd be difficult." She turned to the parents, gesturing at me. "See, this is why we need clear rules. Some people don't know how to share." One parent gave me an apologetic glance and grabbed their kid, hurrying off, but the rest stayed, waiting to see what I'd do. I pulled out my phone. "All right, if you're not leaving, I'm calling the police." Linda's expression faltered for a split second before she smirked. "Go ahead. I've got connections with the HOA board. They'll tell the cops it's a misunderstanding, and you'll look like the bad guy for refusing kids a swim." I hesitated. She might be right. I'd seen how the HOA operated. Corrupt, biased, always favoring Linda. The police might dismiss it as a civil issue. I needed a smarter approach. Instead of dialing, I switched on my camera. "Fine," I said calmly. "Since you've got nothing to hide, I'll just record this. For documentation." Linda's smirk wavered. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, waving a hand. I kept rolling. "So, just to clarify, you're admitting you're using my pool without permission? That you invited all these people onto my private property without my consent?" She hesitated, glancing at the parents, some of whom were now shifting uncomfortably. The recording changed things. They weren't so sure anymore. One kid shivered. "Miss Linda, it's cold," she said. Linda forced a smile. "All right, class dismissed for today," she said, waving them off. "We'll continue tomorrow." I stepped forward. "No, you won't." She turned, that smugness back. "Oh, I absolutely will. Unless you want HOA fines for denying a community resource." I clenched my fists as she strutted off, tossing over her shoulder. "See you tomorrow." I stood there, fuming. This wasn't over. That night, I sat in my living room, weighing my options. The police wouldn't help, and the HOA was in Linda's pocket. I needed something to make it crystal clear my pool wasn't public. Then it hit me. A slow grin spread across my face. If Linda wanted my pool so badly, I'd give her exactly what she asked for, just not how she expected. The next morning, I'd fill it with so much ice it'd rival the Arctic. I woke up determined to end Linda's nonsense. I'd spent half the night brainstorming, but I knew reasoning with her wouldn't work. She had the HOA behind her. To win, I had to hit her where it hurt. First, I needed to understand how deep this corruption went. If Linda felt bold enough to turn my backyard into her swim school, she had real backing. I started with the HOA. I'd never bothered with their meetings, assuming they were just busybodies making petty rules, but ignoring them had been a mistake. If I wanted to beat Linda, I had to play her game. I walked into the HOA office expecting a civil talk. Instead, I got smug smiles and condescending stares. The president, a balding man with thick glasses and a perpetual scowl, barely looked up. "You're here about the pool," he said, shuffling papers like he'd already decided the outcome. I crossed my arms. "Yeah, I want to know why my neighbor thinks she can use my private property for her swim lessons." He sighed, as if I were the inconvenience. Per community guidelines, shared amenities should be accessible for neighborhood use. I narrowed my eyes. "My pool isn't a shared amenity." He gave a patronizing smile. "That's where we disagree." I clenched my jaw. "No, that's where facts disagree. My pool's on my land, not community space." He shrugged. "We see it as a neighborhood benefit. It'd be unfair to deny access." I couldn't believe this. "So, I paid for it. I maintain it. I cover the bills. But because it's useful, it's not mine?" He nodded, unperturbed. "Exactly." I took a deep breath, holding back rage. "And Linda's profiting from it, running a business in my backyard?" He waved a hand. "She's providing a valuable service. Parents trust her to teach their kids. It's a win-win." I stared, realizing arguing was futile. They'd already decided I was the problem. This wasn't about fairness, it was control. Linda had convinced them she had more rights to my pool than I did, and they were enabling her. I leaned forward, voice low. "You know this is illegal, right? You can't claim private property is shared." The president smirked. "Take it up with the board." It clicked. They weren't just bending rules. They were rewriting them for their benefit. Linda had connections. I needed proof. Over the next few days, I dug into the HOA's past decisions. At first, it was standard stuff: lawn rules, pet limits, parking regs. But deeper in, I saw a pattern favoring a select few, especially Linda. She'd gotten fines waived, complaints dismissed, even had the HOA fund her yard's landscaping under neighborhood beautification. Then I found it. Last year, she'd requested a pool for her own backyard. The HOA denied it, citing aesthetics. Suddenly, it made sense. She couldn't have her own, so she took mine, with their blessing. They had something to gain: money, favors, whatever, but they weren't stopping her. I took action. I installed security cameras around my yard, covering every pool angle. If Linda kept trespassing, I'd have it all on tape. I posted private property and no trespassing signs, then had my lawyer draft a cease and desist letter. I delivered it to Linda's door myself. She opened it, skimmed it, and laughed. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." I stepped closer. "This is a legal warning, Linda. Next time you or your students step in my pool, I'll press charges." She smirked. "Go ahead. I've got friends on the HOA board. They'll handle it." That was it. As long as she felt untouchable, she'd never stop. The next morning, my cameras caught her tearing down my signs and resuming her lessons like nothing happened. That was all I needed. I compiled the footage, her ignoring the letter included, and sent it to my lawyer, local news, social media, and legal groups specializing in HOA corruption. I also rallied neighbors fed up with unfair HOA fines. I wasn't the only one they'd screwed over. People were angry, and with proof, they were ready to fight back. Linda didn't know it yet, but her reign was crumbling. I woke early, resolve hardened. I'd considered every way to stop Linda, but she wouldn't quit unless forced, and with the HOA in her corner, normal tactics wouldn't cut it. I needed something drastic to make her regret trespassing. Then it hit me. If she wanted my pool, I'd give it to her my way. I made calls and found a local ice distributor willing to deliver massive blocks on short notice. After explaining my odd but urgent request, they agreed to drop off truckloads that evening. It wasn't cheap, but the payoff would be priceless. By sunset, I was outside, watching workers dump huge ice blocks into the pool. The water chilled instantly, soon covered in floating chunks. The inviting blue turned arctic. Perfect. I checked my cameras. Everything was set. Now I waited. Morning came, and right on cue, Linda arrived with her entourage, ignoring my signs again. Parents set up, kids ran to the pool, and Linda blew her whistle. Then it happened. The first kid jumped in, expecting warm water, and screamed as he hit the icy pool, scrambling out. Another followed, same reaction. Parents rushed over, confused, as Linda, irritated, tested the water with her toes. She yelped, nearly slipping, her face twisting from shock to fury. She stormed toward me on the porch, where I stood, arms crossed. "What the hell did you do to the pool?" she demanded, shivering. I smiled innocently. "Just maintenance. Testing a new cooling system." Her teeth clenched. "This is sabotage. You did this on purpose." I shrugged. "My pool, my rules." Parents murmured, some now questioning her. A mom, toweling off her daughter, turned to Linda. "Wait, you said this was a community pool." Linda paled. "It is." The HOA said, a dad cut in, angry. "The HOA? This guy froze his own pool. This isn't a community thing. Have you been lying?" Linda's confidence cracked. "Look, this is just a childish prank. We'll be back next week when it's over." I chuckled. "Oh, the ice isn't going anywhere. Thinking of making it permanent. Ice baths are trending." A parent scoffed, grabbing their stuff. "I'm not bringing my kid back here." Others followed, muttering as they left. Linda, watching her students vanish, looked ready to erupt. "You'll regret this," she hissed, trembling from cold and rage. She stormed off, whistle dangling uselessly. I exhaled, watching them go. The ice plan worked better than I'd hoped. Her scam was dead, and her lies exposed. That night, I uploaded the footage online. Linda's entitled arrival, the kid's screams, the parents' realization. It spread fast. People loved seeing an HOA tyrant humbled. Comments rolled in, praising my move, suggesting fences or die to keep her out. Neighbors messaged me, laughing at her meltdown or thanking me for exposing the HOA's games. They couldn't ignore it now. That night, the HOA emailed me. Linda was no longer authorized to use my pool for community activities. A weak safe-face move, but it confirmed they'd lost. Linda vanished for days, and my backyard was finally peaceful. No kids, no whistles, just silence. But I knew she wasn't done. She was plotting. Sure enough, an HOA letter arrived, accusing me of disturbing the neighborhood and making shared resources unusable. They were fining me for icing my pool. I laughed bitterly. Her next move, weaponize the HOA since she couldn't scare me herself. I took it to my lawyer. "They've got nothing," he said. "Pure power abuse." I sent a response threatening legal action if they pursued it, CSNG the board. Within a day, they backed off, reconsidering the fine. The next morning, Linda showed up with 2 HOA cronies, all fake professionalism. I met them outside before they could knock. She smiled tightly. "We need to talk." I tilted my head. "About what?" A board member with a clipboard spoke up. "We've had complaints about your behavior toward community members." I raised an eyebrow. "Who's complaining?" Linda jumped in. "You've been harassing neighbors, causing drama, refusing HOA decisions." I nearly laughed. "You mean the HOA that tried to steal my pool?" The other member nodded stiffly. "We're here to find a solution." I leaned on the doorframe. "Here's mine. Linda stays off my property." "Done." She scoffed. "That won't work." I smirked. "Then we're done talking." The clipboard woman shifted. "We'd rather not escalate this." I chuckled. "Escalate?" "Beyond trespassing, illegal business, and HOA corruption." Linda snapped. "You think you're so smart. This isn't over. I'll have the last word." I sighed. "You already lost, Linda. You just don't see it." She glared, then stormed off, the others trailing her. I saved the footage of that too. Next morning, police banged on my door, reporting public endangerment from my pool, Linda's latest stunt, claiming the ice endangered kids. I showed them the pool, explained her trespassing, and they agreed I'd done nothing illegal. "It's your property," one said. "I got a report to prove it." Linda watched from across the street, slinking away when I caught her eye. She was out of moves. Days passed quietly. No retaliation, no HOA nonsense. Neighbor Margaret smirked when I saw her. Linda's cop plan flopped. She's raging, but the HOA's done with her after your video. Then an email came. The HOA had stripped Linda of influence. She was powerless now. One evening, she appeared, bitter and tired. You think you won? She spat. I shrugged. I know I did. She glared. You ruined everything. I grinned. Your illegal pool scam? Yeah, I'm thrilled. She huffed and left, defeated. A week later, Margaret said Linda was selling her house. Whether from shame or spite, I didn't care. The day she moved out, I watched from my porch, victorious. Neighbors threw a party that night, laughing over her antics. Someone joked about icing the pool again. Nah, I said, but I've got the receipt if anyone tries her stunts. Peace settled in. My pool, my home, mine again. I'd not only won but exposed the HOA and earned respect. No one would mess with me now. That was the sweetest triumph of all.